What's up, spooky people? Today we have vampires, and I don't have any announcements. I've been super busy, so being able to plan things to do things has been a little difficult. But today we are doing, I guess, if you want to say monster, demon, undead being, whatever you want to call it, it's a vampire. So I have information from ancient Greece to Nosferatu to Dracula to modern day with some legends in here. There's a lot of information, so I'm going to try to condense this as much as possible. But there are many different characteristics and legends about vampires. A lot of the common ones are they drink human blood, drain their victims of blood, have sharp fangs, turning people into vampires, can't be in the sunlight, so on and so forth. Also, the most famous, turning into a bat. Well, probably not the most famous, but it's up there. It's one of the common things. So, as I said, it goes back to ancient Greece, and they are probably because of sicknesses that went around at the time. And a lot of those things, people didn't have anything to use as a diagnosis because there wasn't science. So they would always claim it was something supernatural. And if you look back to medieval times, it's very, very common. The plague happened. Well, it was their punishment from God. So it's the same thing, but a lot of the legends that we know today are from Europe and a little bit of Slavic, Romanian lore. In the European legends, they were usually described as bloated in appearance and ruddy, purplish, and dark in color. And that's attributed to the recent drinking of blood, which was seen usually seeping from the mouth and nose when one was seen in a shroud or coffin, and its left eye was often opened. That's a very descriptive thing. But if people were also suspected of being a vampire, and you can see this in New Orleans, they would drive a stake through the heart, and then they would also have a cage over their grave so they wouldn't be able to get up out of their grave if they rose again, which is super interesting. These vampires, there was a lot of, again, folklore. And there's Albanian folklore, there is Chinese folklore, there's Russian Orthodox folklore, and a lot of it varies. There's not really a known origin of the vampire, just that something like it existed, and it's all over the world. South America, I think Lithuania, the Indian culture, there's a lot. So to identify the vampires, the most commonly used rituals is finding a vampire's grave by leading a virgin boy through a graveyard or church grounds on a virgin stallion. The horse would supposedly balk at the grave in question. Generally, a black horse was required, though in Albania, it should be white. Holes appearing in the earth over a grave were taken as a sign of vampirism. Corpses thought to be vampires were described having healthier appearance than expected, plump, showing little or no signs of decomposition. And sometimes, when suspected graves were opened, villagers would then describe the corpse as having fresh blood from the victim all over its face. Evidence that a vampire was active in a given locality, including a death of cattle, sheep, relatives, neighbors. They would also make their presence felt by engaging in minor poltergeist-styled activity, like hurling stones off roofs, moving household objects, pressing on people in their sleep. So there are also ghosts. I mean, if they can become invisible, I guess, which is interesting. I haven't heard that one yet until I did all of this. But, I grew up on regular blood-sucking Dracula. So that's just my version of a vampire. So Protection is the known basics of protection: garlic, Bibles, crucifixes, rosaries, holy waters, mirrors. And fun fact, because a lot of people don't put this together, the back of mirrors were made with silver. That's why they can't see their reflection, because they can't touch silver. I figured that out and I was like, holy crap, that makes so much sense, because I always wondered why they couldn't see their reflections. And I don't remember any other not excuse, but any other explanation other than that's the one my brain has held on to ever since. So a lot of these things are to ward against or identifying vampires. Apotropaics, I hope I'm saying that right. These items are able to ward off what are called revenants, which is a common vampire in folklore. Garlic, a branch of wild rose, and hawthorn are sometimes associated with causing harm to vampires. In Europe, the mustard seeds would be sprinkled on the roof of a house to keep them away. Mustard seeds, they are holy. At least I grew up learning that they were holy because of Jesus's teachings. So mustard seed makes sense. Also, sacred items were included: crucifixes, rosaries, holy water. Folklore also states that vampires are unable to walk on consecrated ground. So churches, temples, crossing running water, they cannot touch it. Mirrors, again, are used to ward off vampires. So in some cultures, vampires do not have a reflection and sometimes do not cast a shadow. So this is why they use mirrors. This attribute is not universal. The Greeks said they were capable of both reflection and shadow, but Bram Stoker and Dracula has remained the normal, can't see your reflection. Some other traditions hold that vampires cannot enter houses unless they are invited. And after the first invitation, they can come and go as they please. Also, vampires are believed to be more active at night, when they're generally considered vulnerable to sunlight. We've also seen depictions of them burning in sunlight. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they burn. I know there's other vampires. True Blood, I think they burn too. It's been a while since I've seen True Blood. Honestly, it's been a while since I've seen anything vampire-y. Last thing I saw was the new Nosferatu. Fantastic movie, by the way. Anyway, back on track. Reports in 1693 and 1694 concerning sightings of vampires in Poland and Russia claimed that when vampire's grave was recognized, eating bread baked with its blood mixed into flour or simply drinking it granted the possibility of protection. There are other stories that claimed eating dirt off of the vampire's grave would also give them protection. Destroying vampires also varied. One of the more popular ones today is staking through the heart. This was more popular in South Slavic cultures. Ash was preferred wood in Russia and the Baltic states, where hawthorn was preferred in Serbia, and oak in Silesia, aspen. And it was also believed that Christ's cross, made from aspen, would also prevent risings at night. And they would put these on the graves, or they would even just put aspen branches on the graves of who they believed would be a vampire. A lot of them are staked through the heart, as I mentioned, though in Russia they targeted the mouth, and this was also common in northern Germany. And the stomach was the target in northeastern Serbia. Piercing the skin of the chest is a way of deflating and bloating. Piercing the skin of the chest was a way of deflating the bloating vampire. There's also a similar practice of anti-vampire burial, and they buried sharp objects such as sickles with the corpse so that they may penetrate the skin if the body bloats sufficiently while transforming into a vampire. Decapitation was preferred in Germany and Western Slavic areas, with the head buried between the feet, behind the buttocks, or away from the body. And this was seen as a way of hastening the departure of the soul, which in some cultures was said to linger in the corpse. The vampire's head, body, or clothes could also be spiked and pinned to the earth to prevent rising. Romani people use steel. Venice, a brick forced into the mouth of a female corpse, has been interpreted as vampire slaying ritual. And they discovered it in 2006 on a female corpse. Bulgaria, over 100 skeletons with metal objects, such as plow bits, were embedded in the torso and have been discovered. Boiling water over a grave or complete incineration of the body was also something that they did. And in southwestern Europe, a vampire could also be killed by being shot or drowned, by repeating a funeral service, by sprinkling holy water on the body, or by exorcism. Romania, garlic was placed in the mouth. As the 19th century came about, a precaution was shooting a bullet through the coffin. Body dismemberment. In Germany, a lemon was placed in the mouth of people who were suspected to be vampires. So those are like the most basic things. Again, there's a lot of information, and I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of information, but those are the basics of the folklore and the cultures around the world. Well, the most common ones that we know. And today, we do have a lot of modern fiction, of course. A lot of vampire things were very popular, especially in the early, mid 2000s, 2010s. That's when we got True Blood, Twilight. I think there might have even been a remake of Dracula in there somewhere. I think in the 90s, we had Interview with a Vampire. Vampires have been very, very popular for centuries. And we kind of just grasped onto it more in the media. Are they real? Again, the superstition thrived in the Middle Ages. And because the plague left behind bleeding mouth lesions on the people who had it, a lot of like the common people would believe it was a sign of vampirism. And it wasn't uncommon for anyone with unfamiliar physical or emotional illness to be labeled as a vampire. And researchers have pointed to porphyria, which is a blood disorder that can cause severe blisters on the skin that's exposed to light. And that disease is also linked to the legend. So again, medical things that they couldn't explain, they were used as an explanation for these people. Countess Elizabeth Bathory. She's known as the Blood Countess. She was a Hungarian noblewoman. She is known in vampiric folklore because she bathed in the blood of virgins to maintain her youth. This woman was absolutely insane. She was very, very cruel. She hired maids just to kill them and torture them. She got her kicks off of torturing them, especially. And she would keep them alive as long as possible because as long as they're bleeding, she can get their blood and then she can bathe in that blood so she can maintain her youth, or at least that's what she believed. And I can do an episode on that if we're feeling like it. The New England vampire panic of the 19th century was due to tuberculosis, or known as the White Plague. And in several cases, a lot of vampirism in Rhode Island and eastern Connecticut were claimed, and relatives of deceased patients were blamed for draining life from the living. I thought that we could just kind of go over some New Orleans legends because New Orleans is rumored to have a lot of vampire clans, if I'm saying that right. And there is a building, and I can't remember what street it's on, but I see it a lot on TikTok. And they're claiming that the top of this museum historical building, because of the windows being like boarded and cut off, that there's vampires up there. Apparently, no one will answer that question. You cannot go up there in the museum. So nobody knows what's up there. It's most likely just a rumor, but who knows? Maybe there are vampires up there. In New Orleans, we have the Carter brothers. And this is apparently one of the most infamous legends of New Orleans. John and Wayne Carter in the 1930s were responsible for a lot of disappearances in the French Quarter. Their apartment was raided, and they allegedly found 4 people tied up and drained of blood. The brothers were captured and they were executed, and their bodies mysteriously vanished from their tombs, fueling rumors of them being vampires. The brothers' methodical approach to bloodletting suggested more than just madness. And they said it hinted at a dark supernatural necessity. And the supposed escape from their tombs just reinforced the belief that they were vampires and not human. So then we have Jacques Saint Germain. He was a wealthy Frenchman in New Orleans in the early 20th century. According to the people of that time and legend, he never ate. You would never see him drink. And then when he would throw these lavish parties, he would only drink wine. Then suddenly he disappeared. And that's when the rumors of him being a vampire started to go around. And a woman apparently escaped from his home and he claimed he tried to drink her blood. He has a resemblance to the Count de Saint Germain, who was a European nobleman, and that nobleman was rumored to be an immortal alchemist and vampire, which then only made the speculation even more concrete for everybody. And the woman who escaped from his home described that he tried to bite her neck and attempted to drink her blood. But then the police investigated, and there was no evidence in his residence. And there was only wine bottles filled with what appeared to be a mixture of wine and blood. We have the Casket Girls, and they arrived from France in the early 18th century. And they went to this place called the Ursuline Convent upon their arrival. And according to legend, they didn't bring like normal like bags. They brought these coffin-shaped chests. And because they were coffin-shaped, speculation started going around that they brought vampires over and not clothes. So at this convent, they took the caskets and put them in the attic, and then they nailed it all shut to hold the vampires in there with nails blessed by a priest. And this is probably the place that I was thinking of earlier. And you can't see up there, and you can't go up there. So it makes sense that this would be that building. Again, are there actually vampires up there? I don't know. They're also not going to tell you. So there was a lot of, modern vampire stories. We have Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire that was also a movie. We have Dracula. We have Nosferatu. All up to Twilight. My Mom Has a Date with a Vampire. If you don't know what that is, it is a Disney Channel movie, and it's very nostalgic for me, and that's probably the only reason I like it. And then we have True Blood, and I know there's many, many more out there. Salem's Lot, both book and movie. So again, modern times, we really, really have a lot of our own vampire stories now. And across the board, a lot of them are fairly different. True Blood, they would explode when they died. Very interesting, very gory. Buffy, the Vampire Slayer, staked them, turned to dust. Sunlight, they burned. Across the board, crosses, rosaries, holy water pretty much are common as deflectants to deflect vampires and keep them away. Garlic is used in some cases. I haven't seen garlic very recently being used in anything, but that is another common one that people think of when they think of resisting vampires. Can't come into the house unless invited is another big one that they really play on. Twilight, they sparkled in the sunlight. I liked the books when I was in middle school. The movies, not so much. Kind of creepy, to be completely honest. 117-year-old vampire watching a teen. That's weird. But they sparkle, and they have venom in their teeth, which then turns the people. True Blood, they had to bury their spawn in order for them to come back as a vampire after being bitten. There's other ways of turning into a vampire. The vampire drinks your blood, you drink the vampire's blood. That's another common one. So vampires are everywhere. The Vampire Diaries kind of played on the whole amulet being able to walk in the sun thing, which was pretty interesting. I am putting together, well, we're already into it, a D&D campaign that involves vampires, and running water specifically is bad for them. Sunlight is bad for them. It can turn into a bat. Well, at least Strahd can turn into a bat. And so can Cazador from Baldur's Gate 3 can turn into a bat. They can turn into gaseous forms. They still drink blood. They can charm people. There's that aspect of modern media having them look into the eyes of their victim and charming them into doing things that they want. It's also in Nosferatu. So there you have it. You have a small, condensed explanation of vampires. Again, there was a lot of information, and I did my best. There is much lore on the vampires, and there's much lore on the vampires. And unfortunately, we would be here forever if I tried to talk about every single aspect of the history of vampires. But it is very interesting. It goes back to ancient Greece, which makes sense, and the different countries that have these vampire folklore. But the main ones that we know are from European countries. So we focused on European countries, which there's a lot, but there's not, because it's the explanation of why these legends happened. But that's like the base of the history for Europe, which I would have thought there would be way more to that. But I think the more in depth would be to go into the people who were seen as vampires. Vlad the Impaler, Elizabeth Bathory. Those are the top two that are really known as vampires. And Vlad the Impaler is the inspiration for Dracula. So it all kind of makes sense when you put it all together. But what it comes down to is the European folklore is very basic, and it is still consistent today. Although we have changed it a little bit in our entertainment, for the most part, the lore is the same, which is pretty cool because lore often changes a lot. Like, it's like playing telephone, because all of this, unless it was written down, it was orally spoken to people and others, And, things start to change a little bit as time goes, and the more you do that. So the fact that we are consistent is pretty cool. Our telephone has been working with vampires. So that's all I have for you today. If you go ghost hunting, don't forget the salt. If you see a vampire, pull out your garlic, a mirror, cross, whatever suits your fancy. Pull it out, repel it, don't let it in your house. And as always, stay spooky.